Hello, everybody, and welcome to Untethered.tv. I'm your host and founder, Rob Woodbridge. You know why you come here each week is to get behind the scenes of a mobile something. It's either a mobile startup, a company that's bringing mobile into their enterprise, an idea, a big concept. That's what you come here to do. And you know, today is going to be great. This has been a year or more in the making, actually, where we've just, you know what, I haven't been ready for this guest for one entire year, and we've been talking about doing it. We finally sat down to do it, and this is also an Ottawa-based company. So you know how I feel about bringing Ottawa-based, that's where I am, Ottawa-based companies onto a show. They are my priority because I believe that we have a great mobile ecosystem, and this is an example of one of these companies that is sitting in the mobile in this ecosystem. So who is the company? This is a company called Openera. It is a company that, you know, have you ever lost a file in your email on your device? And, you know, it's supposed to be easy. It's supposed to allow you to communicate effectively, but you all of a sudden have so many different places to be looking for email, so many different places to be classifying your documents, so many different places to store your documents. It is a pain in the ass, and this company simplifies that and then some, and we're going to dive into it. But I'm going to bring Peter in right now. I should warn you, and he's asked me to warn you, this is not Peter the trucker. This is Peter Lalonde, the Movember participant. Right, Peter?
That is correct.
Wow, man. Welcome, buddy. Thank you for doing this.
Very much, Rob.
So this is a, you know, before we actually dive into this, I know that you've gone through a Montreal-based incubator, and it was Founder Fuel, and you did a pitch at Founder Fuel, and you are a founder that walked off the stage. I haven't heard about something like this since like the heady days of the .com era, where you walked off the stage, walked into a bar, and what? Signed a term sheet at the bar?
That is correct. It was quite an evening. It was a lot of fun. We had a great response both on stage and then, more importantly, off stage at the VIP reception at the bar, where we signed a term sheet. Right there, I think the quote in the Venture Beat was a beer stain term sheet, which could be potentially accurate.
But it's legal and tender, right? It's not like
I believe it is legal and tender, and we have the check in hand, so I think that's good.
So I was going to say, like the important signature is at the end of a check, right? The bottom part of that line on the check, right?
Correct.
But this wasn't a kind of a sure designer. It wasn't one of those.
You know what? To be honest with you, it was before my first beer.
Okay.
Before the bartender was able to pour a beer for me, the investor came up and said, "We got to do this now."
So was that entirely based on what? Like what do you think that? I mean, because honestly, there haven't been many stories of this where you've walked off stage quite literally. You do your end of session pitch. You're up there, and I'm going to link to the video and for that presentation. But you get off the stage, and then he hands you a check. Like, did you ever?
Well, yeah, it was something that was in the works, and I think that there's been a lot of hype around what we're doing, and there's been a lot of hype around Openera for the last 3 to 6 months, and we capped it off in Montreal at Founder Fuel Demo Day, and the hype just continued and kind of escalated, and has been escalating ever since. So, I can never speak to what an investor's motivation is, but we're close. Like, we got to do this now before it's too late.
For him, you mean? Too late for him?
For him, yeah, exactly. For the investor.
Well, does that?
And it was her. It wasn't him.
Okay, my apologies.
That's quite all right.
You know, one of the things that, and we're going to talk about this because you'll quickly know that I've known Peter for quite some time, and genuinely a great, awesome guy. I spent a week in San Francisco, and this is a personal story, is that I was going to San Francisco for a week for GigaOhms, Mobilize, and a couple of other conferences that I was speaking at, and I just casually, I knew Peter was there. He spent 33 days there last fall. Is that right?
So around 5 weeks, yeah.
5 weeks away from his family, and I just sent him a note saying, "Hey, do you know anywhere to stay?" And he said, "Yeah, my door is open." And I ended up spending a week. I think you threw me out of there eventually on the 8th day. Is that?
There's no throwing Rob Woodbridge.
No, well, and forever, indebted to Peter for opening his door to a wayward, lost Canadian in the middle of the big city. So Peter and I have known each other for quite some time, and I've taken a great fascination to what Openera is doing. So for those people who don't, and we will talk about this funding process that he's gone through and the agony and the pain, and we're also going to talk about the startup lessons that he's gone through. But before we get into that, you got to know what Openera is, because this is one of these things. Like a utility, that will grow in importance as we kind of adopt the cloud, and businesses do so and adopt these devices as they're starting to do right now. So why don't you talk about what Openera is? I'm going to shut up for a second and just listen.
Sure. Well, Openera started as an idea because I just could never find anything. And being in the enterprise content management space my entire career, and not being able to find my own content became incredibly embarrassing and frustrating. And I realized throughout my career that people hate filing. People don't put things where they're supposed to go. And in the age of the cloud, it becomes so easy to just not put anything anywhere. It just ends up wherever it is. And that's just not a good place for it to be. So Openera automatically files for you. So whether it's a sales contract that's supposed to be in Salesforce, or a legal agreement that's supposed to be in your Box or Dropbox account, we'll automatically put it based on users' personal preferences or a company's corporate policies. But really where the mobile aspect comes in, I think that's what your audience cares most about, is that the mobile app allows you to find any file in 2 taps, because we automatically index, we automatically categorize and tag all your files based on all the metadata, all of the user information that we see in that transaction. And we're able to put things where they're supposed to go first, but also tag, index, and categorize so that you can find those files really fast. And that's really what's becoming more and more valuable for me, is the ability to find a file anywhere, regardless if it's in my email, if it's in Dropbox, in Salesforce, Box, it doesn't matter. And that's really what Openera is all about, is taking away the burden of, you think about it for a second. Companies spend millions of dollars on systems that rely on individuals to file, and we don't do that very well. We're terrible. Humans are terrible at filing. We hate doing it, so we don't do it. There's very, very few of us that actually like doing it, so we do it for you. We relieve that burden from the user.
Well, you know what? What's fascinating to this? I agree. I don't like filing. I don't like putting anything away. And if you've seen my closet, you will understand, right? And my desk.
You don't want to see.
Yeah, too much information. But the fundamental challenge of all of these things is that the cloud has opened up, and everybody is using these tools for storage. And this is back in the 70s and 80s. These are just network computers, ultimately. But you're right. It has become such a challenge to do this and to find documents. And then there's an entire structure around those documents. What is allowed to leave a corporation? Who's allowed to see these documents? And it just kind of you follow. That's what was so fascinating when you explained Openera that first time in a Starbucks all those years ago, was that long tail of just continuous innovation that can happen around how an enterprise manages their documents, and the simplest thing, the hardest thing for anybody, as you said, is just getting those documents into a system, right? And that's where it fails, the human side of it.
It's the human side. No matter how advanced the technology is becoming,
how big our brains are,
we're still the problem. Right, we're the problem. So if we can take ourselves out of the equation and automate the stuff that we absolutely hate to do anyways, we really satisfy both sides of the problem, right? There's the company side. I like to tell people that, as Peter Lalonde, I really don't care where my files are as long as I can find them. But as Peter Lalonde, CEO of Openera, I absolutely care where my files are. I want to make sure that our legal agreements are somewhere, tucked away nice and safe, and no one can see them, and only I can get them when I need them. But the reality is that I'm not very good at filing. Not many people are. We hate doing it, so let's just take that out of the equation.
Well, yeah, I'd love to see that. Like, where was that signed agreement from the bar there?
Well, it ended up on Twitter of all places, right?
Well, there's another document management system right there. But so a little bit of history. When did you? So you came from OpenText, right?
Yeah. Correct. That was one of the content management companies that came.
So there's
it really started in. I'm going to date myself, but in the '90s at a company called Interleaf out of Boston. So I worked out of Boston for several years, and Interleaf was really the birthplace of document management, content management. So companies like OpenText, Documentum, PC Docs, which became Hummingbird, and it really came out of Interleaf. So all of the guys that I worked with went on and started these great document management, content management companies.
So why did you go?
But
Why did you go down the other side of it, right? Which was the collection point. Like, was it just that obviously this is a huge opportunity that was just not seen by a lot of companies at this point, because humans are.
well, I remember being in the thick of it, and I had the blinders on, right? And I still see this today. I had the blind. If users just read the manual and did what we told them, everything would be perfect, right? Life would be grand. So let's just keep, pushing that message and make sure people, like, it was always a training problem. It was a user adoption problem. It was other problems. It was never the technology's problem. So I had those blinders on for a long time, and then there was an aha moment when I was at OpenText, when I realized that, you know what, people are just never going to change. I'm not going to change. I started to look at my own behavior, and meanwhile, my public face, I'm talking to people about how they should be doing things, how things should be filed so that your company can stay compliant and you can be a better employee and more satisfied. And I look at the way I operate, and the two didn't match. So I realized people are never going to change. And the reality is, if we could plug into existing workflows, the way people actually work, wouldn't that be so much better? And if you think about the world and the business world today, absolutely anything and everything important happens in email. So if we could tap into that and be able to look at what's in your email, be able to pull out the important stuff, leave the unimportant stuff in your email, but actually take the important stuff like the contracts and the invoices and put them where they're supposed to be the first time. That's where you all of a sudden see some real change, and you see some real value very, very quickly.
So you started this company when?
So the official launch was at the International Startup Festival last year. That was in Montreal. I went, and I like to say that we went with an idea, an alpha prototype, and some slideware, and just talked to a lot of people and started to kind of pitch anyone that would listen and, validate whether or not, this thing would fly if it had legs. And what we learned pretty quickly, beyond just all of the amazing content that we got at that conference and meeting people, both from the Valley and Europe and everywhere about startup life, we learned that everybody has this problem, and everybody wanted the problem to be solved. So we took it to the next step, and that's where we started to write some code, get our first alpha product really ready, and that's when we went to San Francisco for 5 weeks. And we dove in. We had a lot of different theses, a lot of different ideas. We thought that, okay, this idea of automating, filing is really important for salespeople. Let's focus on sales, and let's just get sales contracts into Salesforce.com. Let's go to Dreamforce. Let's talk to them about, automating a forecast. Imagine a VP of sales not having to rely on what a sales rep tells them is going to happen this quarter, but actually look at the activity. How many files are getting, how many contracts are actually being saved into Salesforce? How many proposals are being sent? How much email traffic is going between the customers, prospects, and the sales reps? We thought that was brilliant, and that was going to be it. But when we demoed it at Dreamforce, we realized, yeah, it's a great idea. People like the idea. But everyone stopped us and said, how did you get into our email? How did you get those files into Salesforce? I don't care what those files are. How'd you do that? And that really led us to pivot and realize that, okay, the real value is kind of my original thesis around people hate filing. Let's do it for them.
That's such a significant lesson, right? So, I mean, I just want to reiterate that whole process that you went through. So, this was the summer of 2011 that was the Startup Festival in Montreal. I was there. It was a great event as well. And you went there with an idea and some concepts, and you talked to as many people you could about this problem that you're trying to solve, right? And then based on that, you had enough intel to move to the next step, which was, okay, listen, if there's one place that we need to be, we're going to get this validated, either from investors or from technology partners. We're going to go to San Francisco, right in the heart of this. So you pack up, you head to San Francisco for 5 weeks. You talk to everybody. You went to Dreamforce, you went to Box.net's conference. You did everything, right?
Yep.
and you talked to as many people as you could, and that helped shape the idea even more. And then based on that, you're
Absolutely.
picking your direction based on that much input over that much time with your background to be able to kind of pick that direction that you're going into.
Yeah.
So
That's exactly what we did.
what a process.
We also, while we were down there, we went to TechCrunch Disrupt and realized that there weren't a lot of enterprise startups out there. Felt very alone.
Yeah. Oh, I remember you did a pretty impressive, great write up of TechCrunch. Your thoughts on TechCrunch Disrupt, which
Yeah.
we don't have to share here, but they weren't great. Um,
No, I didn't have the best experience at Disrupt. It was mostly that it was around the whole I think they called it Arrington
yeah.
Gate scandal, and that breaking, and every press that wanted to talk to us wanted to talk about what did we feel about Michael Arrington leaving TechCrunch.
Yeah. No, I got a
It
company
really
here that I want to
mattered
tell.
to me.
I don't care. Who is this guy? So that process went very well, and I mean it took some time, and it helped shape your business. But I mean, what did that do? That for those people who don't really understand what it means to kind of immerse yourself in this community, you went down there for 5 weeks and were so active for those 5 weeks, and then beyond. What did that do to the relationships? Like, there's one thing to connect over Skype or phone, but what did that in-person thing do? That old-fashioned way.
No, that was you can't put a price on that. Like, everyone says you got to be in the valley, you got to be in the valley, and there's a lot of truth to that. I don't think you have to live in the valley, but you have to be in the valley, right? And we hear this over and over. It gets kind of tiring. But to spend 5 weeks there and be going out every night, meeting people, going to every different startup event, tech event, realizing that no matter which event you choose to go to, you're missing 3 other ones that could be just as valuable. Really opens your eyes to the size and scope of that community, and it is a pretty wide open community as well. A lot of people want to help, which is great, and building those relationships is important. So being able to pick up the phone now and call the folks that I met while I was down there, and continue to go back and visit, is really, really important. So for any entrepreneur thinking about starting up, you have to think about what's your if you're a tech startup in cloud, social, mobile, there's got to be some area of your business plan that incorporates travel down to the valley.
Well, just to give you perspective, Pete snuck me into the Box.net annual meeting. What was the band that was playing that? Do you remember who they were?
Yeah, it wasn't very good.
No.
This year was Weezer. It was a lot better.
I can imagine. Well,
I forget the name of that band.
It was an 80s band, right, that you can buy for 50 grand these days. Yeah. But I knew one song. But that's not the reason I'm telling you this, is that he walked up to Aaron Levy and introduced me to the guy who, for those of you who don't know, he's the CEO and the founder of Box.net, and now worth, $8 billion or something to that extent. But those relationships, those intangible relationships that you can't get just by touching a screen like we're doing here, are so important, and that stuck with me. That was a big lesson. The other side of that was the commitment that you showed. Right, there's something about being seeing an entrepreneur all in like this. 5 weeks away from your family, 5 weeks isolated, 5 weeks with a couple of contacts, and then 300 events that you got to get to in 5 weeks. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, a big shout out to my wife for that.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, these aren't the types of things that any entrepreneur can do. There has to be a partner that's willing to pick up the slack while you're away. So you can't that does not go unnoticed.
No, well, no, and you know what? It's it's an unsung hero situation right there. That's for sure. And
yeah.
All right, so you're there. One of the catalysts had to have been in your thinking around this product. Obviously, email has become more and more of a mobile play. Like, was it, were you searching for an idea in the mobile space, or did it just kind of marry up, or this is like, okay, this is the perfect thing. This is the perfect way to launch this product. Was that just happened like that?
Well, I think it was, the industries, the cloud and mobile industry, the way that both these industries independently grew up, and coupled with my background in enterprise content management, the mobile industry became something so important to what we're doing, right? we always talked about mobile in ECM, but we didn't have the ability to do too much back then. Right? It just wasn't a great platform. To have a enterprise content management solution on your BlackBerry, we did okay. But then, with the explosion of cloud storage, this problem became just so much worse. And then the need to be mobile first and be able to actually, I live on my mobile device. I'm an iPhone guy now. Years and years as a BlackBerry guy, I'm an iPhone guy. But I live on it. I access email and all my social networks and all my content on my device first. I very rarely pull out the laptop. I'm on the go, right? I often talk about being in the back of a cab, and that's when I need something. I really need to find something immediately. It's because I'm in the back of a cab on my way somewhere important. So really, it was these industries kind of aligning and seeing that there's no way we can do what we need to do if we don't have a mobile strategy. It has to be mobile. But mobile is one side of the coin, mm-hmm. right? The other side is it's the cloud, it's the automation. What we're doing is we're giving users, that enterprise automation capability, but we're putting that in their pocket. We're giving them the ability to automate what they don't like to do, get those files to where they need to be, but have it readily available in their pocket anytime they need it. And that's where I think it's really, really powerful. And we have an opportunity with that to do more.
Well, I couldn't agree. Obviously, I mean, I'm smack dab in the middle of this mobile industry, and love it so very much. And it's the nuances that something like Openera brings, right? Which is, it's something that runs in the background that you don't really understand you need it until you really need it. And then when you really realize the capabilities of it, you think, how could I live without this? And I think that's one of the beautiful things about what you guys are doing. And then everything else behind it. If you're a company that starts using these tools, everything else behind it is for you. But for the user, it is to get the files when they need the files at that time.
You got it. So that's exactly it.
And mobile obviously a catalyst to get that done. I mean, just out of curiosity, you eventually started mobile, you move away from mobile, you're going to move at some point. To web-based and desktop, those kind of things. Is that in the?
Well, we are right. We really started web-based, right? We started with Openera. It's a cloud application, and it's really a background process for the most part. For the first 6 months, I've been setting up rules, kind of my own if this then that type rule, and files end up where they're supposed to be. But it's really when you take that and marry it with the mobile. So it's great that they're where they should be, but now I can really find them fast, regardless of even if a rule did not apply and we did not move that file, you're still going to find it because it's buried in your inbox or it's buried in Dropbox or Salesforce or somewhere else.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like you start off as a web-based tool, but how different is the overarching vision from that? Those first days. So. We've gone through that process, right? Where you've tested the idea, you've thought about it for a long time. You've been in the step back. You've been in the industry for a long time. Then you thought about the idea for a long time. You went out and started talking about the idea, which is so important as an entrepreneur, isn't it? To go and talk about the idea. Can you imagine not talking about it?
No, I can't. You have to talk about it.
So you hear
ideas are worthless, right? You got to get out there. You got to talk. And you got to validate. If you don't validate, you're dead.
Well, and that's what people think is that, look, if I talk about it, I'm dead. Somebody's going to steal the idea. But you've been talking about it for a year, haven't you? Over a year, 18 months.
Yeah.
And
absolutely. It's been a year and a half. We've been talking, very, very publicly about this, right? Anytime I get a chance, I'm up on stage talking about it.
Exactly. Well, so you went through that whole process, and has your vision shifted here? Like, as you're on the cusp of closing a seed round, has that vision shifted from where it started to where you are today? You said that you started here, you kind of broadened your approach a little bit out here, and then you came back to your original idea. That's an exercise that everybody should go through, but it hasn't strayed much, has it, from those first initial thoughts? Has it?
No, it hasn't. I think if anything, we've gone back to the original vision a little bit more, and I'd say that if anything, we've strengthened the vision around the corporate solution, so compliance, compliance is a very boring thing to talk about. No one really wants to talk about compliance. But the reality is, when you're talking to companies and they're spending millions of dollars on these systems, if people don't use them, they're worthless. Their investment goes out the window. But more importantly, they're at risk, right? They're at risk of not being compliant. So it's great. I talk about Dropbox and Box and Evernote and all these great consumer-like apps, but the reality is, it does come down to compliance. That's where the bills are going to get paid, right? So we're seeing pockets of users using Openera at companies, and those companies aren't seeing any value from that use. So they're perfect leads for us to go and talk to the company and say, hey, listen, you've got 20% of your organization using Openera, but here's how you can benefit. You can automate adoption of the technologies you want them using, and you can automate compliance so that you always know that invoices are where invoices need to be. And, sales contracts are always where sales contracts need to be. So, the vision has changed, but it's changed and come back full circle.
And is that just about simplification, right? Like, did you think that you were going down a path that was just going to be too complicated? You yourself, we had this conversation well over a year ago about setting, and you just mentioned it, setting up the rules for your, for the way that you structure the documents coming in. And you kind of came to the realization that people aren't going to set up those rules, are they?
No. I think the if this then that crowd, that will definitely set up the rules and get really complex and set up some crazy rules that will figure out that, hey, these are pretty cool rules. But the average user doesn't want to do that. So we had to bury that, right? We wanted to make it as simple as possible, bury that, and really give the rule capability, to match corporate policies, and give that to an administrator where they can spend the time to build out those rules that match their corporate policy and automate it for everyone. So the user doesn't have to change their behavior. The user doesn't even have to know that this is running in the background, but it is, and it's making their life easier, and it's taking away the necessity for them to do it.
How important, or how long did it take you for you to realize that UI, UX, simplicity, like that's a hard road to ride, isn't it?
Ridiculously hard, yeah. I always knew that UI and UX was going to be important, but I didn't realize how important it was going to be. And it's probably one of the biggest challenges that I've had, being a non-technical founder, relying on outsourcing, not finding a real, solid technical co-founder for quite some time. There's a lot of roadblocks.
That's a pretty steep hill.
A lot of challenges.
No kidding.
Uphill. You really, it is challenging. And design skills are something that, you combine that with technical skills can be incredibly powerful. But how do you find it? Where do you find it? How do you get them, passionate about the idea of automated filing for compliance purposes? It's not the sexiest application in the world, right? So you do have to do some selling at why this is important.
Well,
but at the end of the day, I need to get the best designers, best developers on this problem, because if people don't use it, it becomes less valuable.
Well, how did you find your co-founder? I mean, I know that as a non-technical founder, I mean, the big challenge is you can't, huddle in your basement and build and reiterate, right?
No.
Unless you're going to. So how did you? I mean, that process. I remember watching you go through this. That process, difficult, right? Because what you're looking for is somebody that's gainfully employed, enjoying their job, and exceptional at what they do, and it's hard. You have to convince them to what? Come and work for free?
I had to convince them to quit the other startup that he was, working on. Sell them on not just the vision of Openera, but the team. Right? We've got an amazing team, and had to sell them on the market opportunity and the fact that Openera is not going to be just a small company, but we're high growth. We're going after a big market. We're solving a problem that everybody has. And fortunately, so, Mark Lennox, what is our CTO, he was a co-founder of, one of the co-founders of MXI here in Ottawa. They grew to a $40 million company with an exit recently. but more importantly, he tried, MXI tried to put in a filing system, a compliance system. And guess what? He learned that people don't like to file, right? So he felt the pain. So he had the background. He knew the pain. He knew the problem, not just as a user, but also as a company. And he saw where we were going. And I think, the traction that we did have with Openera early on, and a lot of, some of the press that we were getting, helped convince him to jump on board. But I think it was my charming ways that really made him want to join the company.
It was your stash.
No, it was definitely not the stash.
Well, I mean, did you audition other co-founders, like technical co-founders? I mean, because this was a long process. Some came came close, some didn't. But can you say a few words about that lead up to finding a guy like Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our original CTO was an amazing guy who, Chris Wise. He runs he's a co-founder of HealthWise, HealthWave, which is a great startup, and he did an amazing job as a CTO. Did a lot of work with us, really helped us get to where we had a product. But his passion is e-commerce. His passion was health. I couldn't keep him interested or engaged in that too long, worrying about files. But ultimately, what it came down to was a recommendation or referral from him to Mark. But in that period of time between the two, I had talked to a lot of potential CTO candidates, and the hardest part as a founder was not settling, right, and not getting the guy that can really take you to the next level, and just being desperate. So I went through a period of time where I was, I'm not sure if I'm going to be, if I'm going to be desperate now. I'm going to just settle and take a guy, here where I probably shouldn't. But no, I, stayed the course and waited for the right, co-founder, right technical lead, and Mark's that guy.
That's got to be one of the most frustrating things, right? Because you see this industry kind of evolving, and for those people that are in the core of an industry as it evolves, you think that there is not enough time, that every minute you wait, like when you go to bed at night, you're worried that when you wake up, it will be gone, right? That industry will have passed, or this opportunity will have passed. Yeah. So what was the time frame between Wise and Lennox? What was the time frame between those two?
It was an eternity. It was probably, I think, 6 months total.
Oh my God!
Maybe a bit more actually, but it was an eternity. And you're right. Every night I went to bed and thinking that I'm going to miss this market opportunity because the market's moving so fast. And fortunately, the market opportunity is still there, and we do have a little bit of runway. So we do see that there's more opportunity, and the opportunity is actually just getting bigger. So I feel very little bit more comfortable about our ability to capture the market and not lose out, because I was very concerned that we were waiting too long.
What about things like your partners? So I know that very early on, you were partnering very closely with Box.net, and you're looking for vendors, or you're looking for partners to integrate with what you're doing. What kind of a challenge is that? You're not funded. It's coming out of your pocket. You've got conditional acceptance from a team. You've got a semblance, somebody in Mark who's coming on as a technical co-founder. You're a non-technical co-founder walking into the lion's den, which is full of technology first.
Yeah.
How do you stand up and convince somebody? First of all, you walk up to Aaron Levy. You build these relationships with people because you're good at that. But how do you walk up and convince a partner to be a part of something that is mostly in your head?
Yeah, well, quite frankly,
do you cry a lot?
It's hard, yeah. Right? It's not easy, but you have to think what's in it for them, and for Box and Salesforce and Microsoft and Dropbox, even any of the content guys in the cloud. Their biggest challenge is the same challenge OpenText had. People don't like to file. People don't do it. Now, Dropbox and others have great syncing technology, but people still don't put stuff where it should be. So a company like Box, if they're selling enterprise applications, right, then that's what they're doing. They're targeting the enterprise. They're going to have the same adoption problem that OpenText, Documentum, FileNet, Hummingbird, all of we see this, and I'm seeing it today many, many times a day. So you talk in their language about why this is important to them,
and they listen,
and that we're not ready. We've got this product. Here's some very early traction. Here's what we've been doing. We can show them some statistics on how many files we're actually putting into Box. It's very easy to stand up and say, hey, listen, we just put 7 million files into your application that never would have ended up there if it weren't for Openera. So it's this automated adoption that gets their attention. But then a company like Box, you have to talk much bigger, right? It's not just about storage. They're not just a storage company. They're an enterprise content management company. They care about compliance. We care about compliance. We automate compliance. So those are the conversations that you have. And you're not immediately a great partner of anybody when you're a startup out of Ottawa, Canada, right? You can't expect that. You just need to understand your position in the pecking order and provide as much value early on as you can. So we're now starting to see that it's not our official partnerships with Box or Salesforce or Workday even that matter. It's the field level relationships. It's the referrals to their customers. They're saying, you're having a problem getting your users to adopt? Try Openera. And that's where we're starting to see our best opportunities is coming from our partners, and then also looking at our user base of users and saying, hey, there's an opportunity here for our partners. It's a two-way street for sure.
So you really have to talk in their language and to the benefit of them, as opposed to walking in with another technology, because there's nothing to stop Box or Dropbox or Salesforce from building the tools. They have the resources, right? I mean, to build Openera.
And they will build certain pieces of this. And one of the interesting conversations I had with Aaron Levy was about, I think it was early on. It was in that 5-week trip to the Valley, and sitting down with him and saying, hey, listen, we're early on. Should we be focusing on Box, or should we be sticking to our open cloud standards and welcoming all cloud services? And what was interesting was he was pretty bullish about maintaining an open cloud initiative, right? So I actually really respected that of Aaron. So that really, you think about what will they build? Well, they will build something that will make it very easy to get stuff into Box, and Salesforce will build something that's very easy to get stuff into Salesforce. But Openera stands on its own, making sure that you as a user can get your stuff wherever it needs to go, because none of us use just one, right?
And that
doesn't exist.
But that's also having the confidence to know. I like that Aaron did that, and I love the idea that, listen, you're right. Salesforce is going to, and they might build a migration tool. Like Box might build a migration tool from Dropbox, right, so that you can bring your stuff over, whatever it is. But when you truly want to use all the tools at hand, whether that's Microsoft's Open Office and Doc Storage, or Google Docs, or Box or Dropbox, or at some point maybe, but probably never, iCloud. This is where we're keeping all this stuff. So you're right. There needs to be an open-ended platform to be able to access and interact with that, just like it's any other file management system. So
absolutely, and it's always a good day whenever there's another announcement of a new cloud storage service from one of the big players. Recently we had Salesforce introduced Chatterbox, right? So people wonder, is that going to hurt your business? No, this is the best news for us. We want more like that.
Well, and the reason for that,
the more that happens,
the reason for that is so that you can remove complexity for your users, right? So it doesn't matter where you keep your documents, and you can have one in each, and So
as from a user's perspective, though, the company may think differently.
Yeah, the company, and that's where you get into the audit trails, and
exactly.
But I'm interested in, during that whole process as well. You were down in the Valley a year ago. We opened up this episode by talking about the funding at the bar, a beer-soaked term sheet that process also pretty painful to go through as a startup, right? So you were all in. You quit your job. You're out there. This is out of pocket. You're doing all these things. You're learning as you're going. First time entrepreneur, and you're out there funding it on your own and looking for funding at the same time. I mean, walk through that process up until the point, like you're still going through it. I realize that.
Do I have to?
Exactly. Just
it's a very painful process.
Show us this. Show us the scars.
I joke, but it's not an easy process. I learned more than I want to about the fundraising process, and realizing that I had a choice. One of the reasons I went down to the Valley for 5 weeks was to determine whether or not I need to move there, and I left thinking I know that I can raise, and I knew at that moment I could have raised had I moved to the Valley. Wait, before you.
How does that, like, I mean, when you say that, you say it kind of matter-of-factly, but we are at a geographic disadvantage. For all the great that Ottawa is, it has a really shitty infrastructure for investment, and I don't even mask that.
I second that emotion.
There is nothing here that there is some great technology here, some great leadership here. There is just shit investors here, and I don't want to cover everybody. There are some great investors in Ottawa, but they invest in companies that aren't from Ottawa for some reason.
Yeah.
So, but you know that you can go to the Valley and fund this. What keeps you here then?
Yeah. It's Ottawa. It's a great place to live.
Yeah.
Right. I've got a family. This is an amazing place to live. Yes. There are great people in Ottawa. There's great talent in Ottawa. The thing that really struck me when I was down in the Valley is there's no way I could compete for talent. Right? There's just no way. And here in Ottawa, we have an incredibly loyal talent base. We've got some amazing schools, not just in Ottawa, but throughout Canada that we can pull from and offer an amazing, salary for Ottawa and amazing benefits for Canada. And we know that we're going to get top-notch talent that will be loyal, that will stick it out through thick and thin. I did not have that level of confidence down in the Valley. There's no way.
No, and I think that you're right. It's free agent nation in the Bay Area.
Yeah, it sure is.
And
I started looking at resumes and meeting people, and there are a lot of companies on these very young people's resumes, and they're very impressive names, a very impressive list. But it became very evident that I know a lot of people in Ottawa. I know a lot of folks from the enterprise content management space even that would gladly jump ship and join a ragtag startup like Openera. Let's just try and get the funding here.
It's the Millennium Falcon of startups right here. That's it. And that you're looking at is Han Solo.
That's
nice.
That's right, man.
There's the quote. Okay, so you finish this funding story. So you realize that you can go out and close a small round. Because I see, quite frankly, some really stupid ideas getting $500,000 at the drop of a hat, right? And I think that's just spreading the investors to just in case funds, right? That it's probably a logical investment, but here's a good idea that is struggling now to close a round, a seed round, and so you realize you can get funding in the Bay Area, but you stay here, and then what happens?
So then you go on the circuit and you start talking to everybody that will listen, right? And you get a lot of introductions to a lot of angel investors and really important people. And you start, pitching the idea, and you get a lot of interest. Everybody's interested. Everybody wants to invest. And then they get, there's a very, I'm not sure what the right word is, but there's a conservatism, right? There's a very cautious Canadian conservatism that comes in when it's talking about writing checks, and we had some interesting experiences along the way. Recently we had some investors back out when they realized that they thought that Northrop Grumman was going to compete in this space.
What?
So, yeah, Northrop Grumman. So it just these and the market's not big enough. So the cloud mobile content space isn't a big enough market. So there's an understanding. There's not necessarily the biggest understanding of what we're doing and the market in which we're playing. And I take full responsibility for that. That's on me for not properly articulating the value in the market that we're in. But it is a lot harder, right? Even in Montreal, people got it. In Toronto, people get it. Waterloo, they get it. It's a lot harder here in Ottawa. It's a telco town, defense town. It's healthcare,
government.
You think about it. So a lot of the industries that get funded, cloud, mobile, social, are tough. It's a tough space.
Yeah.
So we're much less worried about funding right now. Obviously, there's a lot going on with Openera in terms of funding. So we're able to look back kind of fondly on some of these funding challenges that we had.
With a bottle of gin.
Fondly,
I don't believe you at all, Peter. Because while you're going through that process, it's life or death, and it's painful, and it's like, do you ever regret taking that funding route versus going after customers to begin with? Because there's a spot, right? And I think maybe as a non-technical founder, there probably it limits your ability to go after that first customer, doesn't it? Because you can't show them anything.
Well, it didn't. We did have something that we could have shown customers, and we did have interest with customers. I know that we can close deals, but that it was a conscious decision at a stage after a lot of talking to some really smart people and advisors and mentors about really what type of company are we building. And a lot of companies do start and do the bootstrap, go bootstrap, which is great. And I respect that route completely. And I definitely regret many times not going that route. But we're building a high growth business. And had we early on started with some customers, it takes your focus off of what you're building, right? And you start becoming beholden to just a few customers, whereas we're building for the big industry. We're building for, hyper growth. So it was a hard decision to make. It was definitely the right decision. I don't regret the decision, but it's hard looking back because I could have a paycheck for the last year from some of these customers. But realistically speaking, we're building something that's high growth.
It's the right answer, because you can look back, and a paycheck's not what you're in this for. It's not what any entrepreneur is in it for.
No.
There's two things I think. One of them is obviously the challenge of building something from your bare hands, and the struggle. Yeah. The fun is in the building. Trust me, it's not in the maintenance, is it? Building is fun. No, management is shitty, right? It's the same thing with filing, right? Writing the document can be fun. Signing the document can be fun. Putting it where it should be, not fun, right?
No.
So now, what about those down days? Like we kind of alluded to it. So there are these wonderful days. The reaction that people you got from your demo day at Founder Fuel, the fact that you have this beer-soaked term sheet in front of you. Momentum is riding, but people don't see this. It's like this isn't overnight, right? You didn't just get up on stage and have this kind of momentum. There are some of these challenging times. Did you ever think like? And I see this all over the mobile industry right now, which is the guys that thought that they could build a business in their basement by building apps are now struggling to figure out, okay, well, I have to go find a job because I'm broke. So that struggle, you leave your home for 5 weeks, and many times since then have been on the road doing this road show looking for funding. Talk about that, like the highs and lows of being an entrepreneur, Peter, because it is brutal sometimes.
It is, and you experience it in a way that you can't even articulate. I'll tell you exactly how I feel, but you'll never feel it, right? I remember when I started this journey, the number of people that told me exactly what I was going to experience goes in one ear, kind of out the other. Like, yeah, that's what it's probably like for most people, but
I'm
going to be different.
Yeah.
It's but a lot of amazing highs keep the lows in check, right?
Well said.
And I think that's the biggest thing is you gotta make sure that you got these highs, but it's not so much the lows as that bother me. I don't mind kind of worrying and being kind of down, and seeing a competitor come on the scene kind of gets you down. It's the panic that, oh my God, what did I do? Why am I doing this? Am I an idiot? And then the next day waking up and then seeing something on a blog and realizing, my God, I'm a genius. It's just it's unbelievable the spectrum. And I was at an event recently where the speaker had everybody stand up if they exhibited certain traits, and they started saying traits like do you often stay up late at night working on a product or on a project or an idea because you just can't stop and it's amazing, and then do you often crash for a day, and all of these different what you're thinking he's talking about being an entrepreneur, he's actually describing manic depressive behavior. And you realize, everybody else in the room's still standing too. What's going on? But it's definitely a bunch of highs, bunch of lows.
Well, and that is there's a fine line, like creativity and genius and insanity, right? And off the deep end. And it's not going to surprise you that I bring up a guy like Bruce Springsteen in this instance, because he battles this.
Whoa.
You would think of him as many of you may not, but I do, as a genius. And he said that he's battled that kind of imbalance, right? The highs and the highs and the lows of the lows, that split personality. And then he got on some medication, and he basically over 10 years created some of his greatest works, his most prolific time. But
can I just clarify for a moment that you're comparing me to Bruce Springsteen?
There is, Peter.
Wow,
exactly.
It's the Mo.
Han Solo and Bruce Springsteen. That's but it is, and being an entrepreneur is that, and you start to be able to sleep through the nights, though, because oftentimes the panic happens in the middle of the night, and you race down, but you've got that in check once you're able to sleep through the nights. And tell me, though, is there anything better than what you're doing right now?
Nope, not a chance. Right. I look back on my career, working for big companies, even smaller companies, and I was never satisfied with status quo. I always pushed the envelope. People would always look at me. I remember, even at OpenText, they used to call me the cowboy because I did everything different. Right? I didn't follow.
It was the mustache, right?
I don't think so. This was not there then. But I have come to learn that there's a term for that, and it's intrapreneur. Yeah. Right? It's somebody who's working inside a company but is very entrepreneurial. And I didn't realize, I didn't know it. I just was frustrated and always tried to change things. And I always changed them. What I saw is for the better. Things like increasing revenue, I thought was good.
Okay.
I thought increasing any of my key metrics was always good. And having a big impact was good. And some people within companies, big companies, tend to get political and don't maybe see it the same way. So I'm pretty darn happy with what I'm doing now. I don't deal with any of that.
There's nobody keeping you down, keeping your foot on your throat as you have to do as they say. But there are trade-offs, and I want to end this with a question.
Sure.
Around, as I've asked 300 of them already, but around the things that you look back. And you're at this threshold, and what happens over the next year, nobody knows. You close your seed round, you go off and you accelerate, and every decision that you made is now part of a textbook that is heralds your brilliance.
Okay.
The flip side is you close your seed round, the industry shifts, and you go on and do something else, and every decision that you made is scrutinized, right? So. And that's the life of an entrepreneur, right? One day Zuckerberg is a king, the other day he's a buffoon. One day Apple is the king, the next day that you only sold 37 million iPhones, you loser company, right? You're at the whim of other people's mercy. But when you look back at this, like to the point where you are right now, does anything stick out and you say like, I will never do that again? And on the flip side, does anything stick out and says, I will do way more of that? I would have done that sooner had I known.
Yeah. There's a long list of both, right?
Is there?
I think that's give me one. But I think the thing that really sticks out is I will never start another company without a technical co-founder and a designer. Right? It's cliche now. But after living the pain of not doing that, I will never start another company without those two things in place. And, it's all about the team, but it's also about the skill set of that team. That's really, really important. So I'd say that's definitely one thing I will never do again.
What's the thing that you would do?
I would continue to think big, right? Like solve a big problem that everybody has, even if people think you're absolutely crazy for it. And oftentimes people have had choice words for me for solving, trying to solve a problem like email and filing and cloud and mobile. It's
like what gives you the right?
It's definitely a big problem. Definitely something I need to solve for myself, and everybody has it. So the next, I'll absolutely do that again.
I mean, what's the point of attacking a small problem?
I don't really know.
Like you put that much effort into it, and so what? So you can attack a small problem. But when you said that people think you're crazy, is it just because like they don't think that you can do it, or that is it just a matter of nobody can do it? Do you think?
No, I've started to learn that there's a lot of questions around. Well, how come no one else has done this yet? I get that question a lot. Well, how come Microsoft hasn't done this? It must be a really hard problem. Well, it is a hard problem to solve, but it's also one that we're focusing on, and one where we've got some amazing brains focusing on how to fix it. But oftentimes I think the way we look at the problem and how do we make it simpler, not harder, not more complex, but how do we make this problem go away by making it simpler? So I definitely getting a lot of those, how come this hasn't been done yet?
Well,
because we're doing it.
It is. We're in the process of doing it.
We are. We're doing it right now.
We are doing it right now. And that is the big thing. So as you go on and you think, you close your rounds and you go on and accelerate your business. And I think it's that kind of, for those who are still out there listening or watching, it's that kind of attitude that you have to have, is that, you can't be the stubborn entrepreneur that is out there, that it's my way, my idea, and I'm not going to change for anybody. And that's what Peter's demonstrated here, is that when he went out and sought advice, he listened to that advice. He took note of that advice. He got it from multiple points, over a long period of time. He refined an idea. He repitched an idea. He came back many times to the same people. He talked to everybody. He didn't keep it. He didn't hold it close. He didn't think that he had all the answers all at once. But what it did was it gave him a bigger, broader picture of a market that is underserved. And why not? Why wouldn't it be Openera? Microsoft had to start somewhere, right? What was that audacious goal that Bill Gates had? That at one point, every single person will have a computer on their desk. And this is when everybody didn't, right? Everybody's got a device. Everybody's challenged with these problems. Why wouldn't it be Openera? That's my view, Peter. And I wish you all the luck, man.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
So where should I send people now? Now that we've got them all keyed up on this. So do you have a PayPal account that they can start investing in?
Yeah, where's our crowdfunding?
Exactly.
Right? I think the best place, everyone's got to check out openera.com and download the iPhone app. We're working on our Android app right now. So there's a lot that we're working on, but openera.com, sign up, set it up, and feedback. That's the other big thing that we care about. We want to hear what people think. We want to know what's working, what's not working for them, because everyone thinks differently. Everyone works differently.
And it's always that it's the refining process that you did with your pitch, with the business model, and all the way down to the fact that even with the product itself, it's got to work. It's got to be an integral part. So, all right,
exactly.
Go to Openera. That's Open, OPEN, Era, ERA.com, Openera.com, and hit up Peter on Twitter on from Openera. Hit him up anywhere. But download this application. It's available for iOS, Android coming soon. And I'd love to know what you think about it. And I'm sure Peter would as well, as he said. So reach out to me, Rob at Untethered.tv, and I'll pass this information on to Peter. But included, if you are listening to this and you're not watching it, at the show notes on Untethered.tv, there is a link to Peter doing his Founder Fuel Demo Day presentation that will give you a great insight in a short period of time around what this product can do and how it can help you and benefit your organization, and Peter's grand vision about this. And you'll understand right from that video why he actually signed a beer-soaked term sheet in a bar. Man, what a great story. What a great story.
That's awesome.
Peter, I can't thank you enough for doing this. We spent an hour, man.
Hey, Rob.
Huge appreciation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, the time. This has been a long time coming, and I look forward to going out and grabbing a beer and maybe seeing where what other term sheets we can sign.
Get me drunk, and I'll sign something for sure. Right? Whoa! Wait a second.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is. I'd love to have Peter back on. I'm going to have Peter back on as he goes through this process, because it's so fascinating to watch this and to hear where he is, and then to hear where he's going, and to bring that to you guys out there, the faithful Untethered viewer, Untethered listener. So wherever you are, whatever you are doing, I know that you found a tremendous amount of value in this. Reach out to Peter. Reach out through Twitter. Say, listen, I just saw this great episode of Untethered.tv featuring at Openera, and we'll see the reaction to this. And because Peter's been very honest and open, so let him know about that you appreciated this. Peter, thanks. Everybody else watching, we will see you next time on Untethered.tv. Peace from Ottawa.